Welcome, Dr. Oloch. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope your Friday is going well.
Yeah, my Friday is going well. Thank you. How about yours?
Yeah, it's great, great. Yeah, we're still waiting for some folks to join our meeting
Okay.
today. Um, we sent out a another notice that you will be hosting this meeting again today. So we hope folks will be able to join us.
Thank you.
Um, and so we can wait for a couple of minutes for folks to come in. But besides that, I think you remember you got an email that the meeting will be recorded so that folks that are not able to join
Yeah.
will be able to view the recording. So regardless, we'll continue after a few minutes,
Okay.
and the people who will be in the meeting, we'll be able to ask questions, and then you can provide uh, guidance. Um,
Absolutely. Basically, the way I would like to conduct this, I was hoping for more of an interactive session. So I guess you want me to talk about my career pathway, correct? My background,
yes,
my journey, and what I do.
yes,
And I
yes.
was hoping, yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
These
and
meetings are very flexible,
okay,
and different guests take different approaches. So
okay,
you can just play it the way it works best for you.
okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us for this 11th um, Career Steps webinar series organized by the NARST Graduate Student Committee. We're so glad you're here with us today. Today, we're honored to have Dr. Jared Olwach, who will be talking about his journey, his graduate journey, his career journey, and hopefully he will inspire many graduate students who have questions, especially at a difficult time like this. Um, I'm sharing so that you can know how we will be, how our meeting today will flow. Just a little bit about this graduate students career webinar series. Um, it's organized by the NARST. NARST is a global organization that focuses on improving science research in teaching and learning. And one tradition we have here in the chart is because we have members joining us from all across the globe, from the East Coast of the US, the West Coast, from Africa. We have people joining us from Europe, Asia, and Latin America at times. So please take a moment to indicate in the chat where you're joining us from so that we can know who is represented. Just take a minute. We usually take a minute and then we indicate in the chat where you're joining us from. Um, you can write your city or your university and yeah, in the chat so that we will know where you're joining us from. Thank you again for joining us. We're so glad to have you here with us. So I will start. This is Collins Moga. I'm the graduate student coordinator helping NARS graduate students organize and find ways to support graduate students. And today I'm joining you from Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin. So I'm starting by writing that in the chat. So I'm going to encourage you, like if you're in the meeting today, just indicate in the chat where you're joining us from so that we can know the various locations that are represented here. All right. Yeah, as it is stated, um, Isaac Newton once stated that if I have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. In this webinar series, we welcome guests who've been through the graduate journey. They've gone ahead of us, and so they are more equipped to give us advice on where we're going. And today, we're fortunate to have Dr. Jared Oluoch. He's a professor and director of the School of Information and Security. Um, and applied computing at Eastern Michigan University. We'll talk more about himself later. So, a little bit about this Career Steps webinar series. The Graduate Student Committee at NARST understands that navigating the transition from graduate studies to a fulfilling career can be overwhelming. You know, there are countless possibilities, and you could think about academia, industry, government, nonprofit work, and beyond. And so often, graduate students find themselves uncertain, wondering which career to pursue or even how to begin. So, the Graduate Student Committee at NAS recognizes this challenge and is proud to introduce this Career Steps webinar series. These are engaging monthly webinar series designed to illuminate multiple career trajectories. And we offer practical guidance and foster meaningful connection within the NAS community and beyond. This webinar series features accomplished PhDs and sometimes seasoned NAS members who have traversed the journey that some of you are beginning, and they will share their personal stories, complete with the challenges they faced, pivotal moments, and unexpected opportunities. So, our speakers bring to life myriad routes to career success. More than just providing mere inspiration, this session provides concrete strategies and resources, and even networks that you can leverage as you craft your own career path. After all, sometimes it just takes one meaningful connection, one spark that can redefine your career. And so this will be the structure of our session. In the next 20 to 30 minutes, our guest, Dr. Olwoj, will talk about his career journey. He might pivot and take a different approach, and that's okay. And then he will, during that time, he will talk about insights into key decisions and turning points. And most importantly, we'll offer practical advice for graduate students. And then we'll have a time of question and answers for members who are in this meeting to ask questions to, to our guest. So thank you again for joining this meeting. We're so glad to have all of you here. And I can see we have Sharon joining us from Florida. And I'm sure there'll be more people joining us as the meeting progresses. And so without any further ado, again, I'd like to thank Dr. Jared Oluoch for being generous and giving us time and just being willing to support graduate students in their journey by sharing his story. So I'm going to open the floor to you, Dr. Oluoch. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Collins, and thank you, Sharon and Leah and Cobra for joining me. I'm sorry I couldn't make it last Friday because of a conflict, but I'm happy to make it up today. So what I'll do here is I'll just speak from my heart. I don't have any prepared notes, but feel free to stop me along the way if you have any questions or concerns. So as you know, as Collins has said, I am a professor at Eastern Michigan University. I am also the director of the School of Information Security and Applied Computing. In that program, we have a bachelor's program in cybersecurity, a bachelor's in IT, a master's in cybersecurity. We also have a PhD program in technology that is run by the entire college. Other than being a professor and the director, I do a lot of advising for students. I do a lot of research. So maybe let me preface my conversation by talking about my journey thus far. So I was born and raised in Kenya, that's in East Africa. I grew up in a small village. I got my primary, secondary, and part of higher ed in Kenya. And then I came to the US at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. That's where I got my master's degree. My master's degree was in management information systems. And at the time I was arriving in the US, the financial crisis was biting very hard. The housing crisis was collapsing and the job market was very bleak. And so here I was coming from Kenya to come to the US to get education and hopefully get a shot at a better life. But the economy at that time was not very good. So I finished my master's in information systems at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And because the job market was so bad, I ended up having OPT, as you all know, optical practical training for foreign students. And during that time, I did some work in the IT sector, in the voice over IP, voice over internet protocol. And after about close to 2 years, I applied for admission to several PhD programs around across the nation. I was admitted into some, but I ended up going to Auckland University in Rochester, Michigan, primarily because they offered me a graduate assistantship. So I was able to get paid for my tuition and then to get paid as a stipend for helping professors to grade and teach labs. So my time there was great, was wonderful. Maybe I can talk a little bit about the PhD journey. So when I joined there, I was beginning to look for a PhD topic. And as you know, it takes a little bit of a while to get a topic because sometimes you have your own topic in mind, but your advisor might have a different topic. And almost always you go by the expertise of your advisor. So my advisor was mostly in the area of autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, vehicular ad hoc network. So my PhD thesis was on the trust management for vehicular ad hoc networks. So imagine you have vehicles in a network, and these vehicles, they send signals, they receive information, they receive messages from vehicles in the network, but also from the roadside units. So the danger that you have, the challenge that you have is how can you make certain that these messages that you receive from the vehicles, that you receive from the roadside infrastructure, are one, safe, and two, secure. So my dissertation was to build a universal framework, if you will, that allows us to determine if these messages that are being sent in the network are reliable. And I use a lot of Bayesian network. I use a lot of conditional probability to determine if the messages were secure or not. So I worked hard. I defended my dissertation. When I defended my dissertation, of course, the committee asked me to make some changes, some corrections, which I did, and I graduated. So during my PhD journey, I learned that it's also a matter of endurance, to be able to endure, to work hard, get paid a small stipend, and yet your goal is to finish your PhD work. I also learned that if you collaborate a lot with your peers, those who are in the same lab or even in different labs, you are able to get some advice, get some feedback, and you're able also to get some insights into how they do their own research. So I did my dissertation there. I worked hard with my advisor. The other advice I would give is almost always try as much as you can to have a good, cordial, professional relationship with your advisor because their input and their advice is very key to your success. So as I was doing my PhD work, I was thinking of how am I going to get a job after I finish, right? And so, because at the end of the day, you had to get a job. So there were two potential career pathways for me after my PhD work. One was to go directly into academia. The other was to go into industry. Deep inside of me, I am first and foremost a teacher and then a researcher. I like to talk to
Mm.
people, find out how they're doing, see how much I can do in a small way to help them succeed. So naturally for me, academia was the pathway. I could work in industry, but I don't see myself as merely sitting down writing code the whole day. I like to walk out, talk to people, see how they're doing. So then I began the process of applying for tenure track positions. And as you might be aware, the process for applying for a tenure track position is long and intensive. For example, if you want to become an assistant professor next year, you have to start applying almost now, because you apply now, maybe by October, you've put in your application, they're going to review them. And by around December of this year, they have a short list of candidates that they want to invite to campus, so that by January of next year, you've had your interview. By March, you're invited to campus so that you can begin in the fall. So I sent a lot of applications and I got some interviews. In some cases, I got just the first interview. In some cases, I got the first and then the campus visit. You always want to get a campus visit because the campus visit tells you that they have some level of confidence in you. And the way the process works is if you go for the campus visit, normally they have about 3 and sometimes 4 candidates. So you go for campus visit, you give your research talk, you give your teaching demonstration, you meet with the dean, you meet with the chair, you meet with other faculty. And at that time, part of what they're looking for is this person going to be a collegial person? Is it a nice person to work with? Other than your technical expertise, there's also the human element of being able to work in an environment that is diverse. So I applied and ultimately I got accepted to begin work at the University of Toledo as an assistant professor. And maybe I can pivot now to talk about my role there as an assistant professor. But maybe before I go there, I can talk briefly about the application process for a tenure track position. So when you apply for a tenure track position, they are looking primarily for 3 things. One is they are looking for your research expertise. And this depends on the institution. If you go for an R1 institution, which is a highly research intensive institution, or an R2, they are going to put a lot of weight on your research. If you're going for a primarily teaching institution, which is mostly an undergrad institution, yes, they might look at your research, but primarily you're going to see if you're a great teacher. And the third thing they look for is your service. How have you served humanity? Have you volunteered for positions in your department when you were in the graduate school? Have you, like what you're doing now, this is very good service. So they look at all those 3 things, but I think the ones that carry more weight are your research and your teaching. So you put in your packet, you put your letter of intent, and then you have a list of maybe 3 or 4 references. If possible, always try to have your primary PhD advisor as your reference, because he or she is the one who has spent a lot of time with you, because PhD work takes maybe 4 or 5 years in some cases. So they know you very intimately academically. So try to put as one of your references your advisor, primary advisor, because their letter of support carries a lot of weight. And then you can get other references from professors that have taught you, or if you've done any internship in the industry, you can get a reference from them. So that's primarily the application process. And what might also help you is to do some mock interviews. So you could get some of your friends and do a presentation to them. They can give you some advice. So then I got accepted to begin my position at the University of Toledo. So I moved in there as a wide-eyed teacher for the first time. And because I look very boyish, so when I went to the University of Toledo, one of the first few days, I was waiting for my door to be opened. And a student apparently was looking for me, was looking for somebody to advise him. And he sees me standing next to my door waiting for the key. And he says, look, I'm waiting for Professor Jared Oluwash to talk to. And I told him I'm looking for him too. I don't know if you have seen him. So anyway, my time at the University of Toledo was very great. I spent close to 10 years there. So I began as an assistant professor. I was teaching primarily computer science, engineering technology. I was teaching some IT classes. I taught programming, I taught Java, I taught computer networks, I taught web services, I taught a little bit of information security. And 1 year into my role there, the person who was the director of the computing program was retiring, and they asked me if I could step in. So I'm a newly employed tenure track assistant professor, and now I have on my shoulder some responsibilities. I'm not tenured, which means I need to do a lot more publications. I need to do a lot more grant writing. I need to do a lot more research. But I also saw that it was an opportunity for me to learn some leadership skills. So I accepted the position. So in my role as the director of the program, I was in charge of accreditation with EBET. I was in charge of assigning classes to instructors. I was in charge of looking at the quality of the delivery of our programs. And I worked very well with my colleagues. I got a lot of support from my colleagues. So I'm working hard to get tenure, which means I have to apply for grants. And I did a lot of application for grants. I did not get most of them, but the first grant that I got was a small grant, $50,000. And this was mostly to explore the possibility of my research, how it could be commercialized. And then maybe 2 years in, almost 3 years in, I got a big grant. I got a grant for about $1.8 million with two of my colleagues. I was the principal investigator. I had a colleague from computer science and another colleague from education. In truth, though, I think the reason we got the grant was our colleague, who was from the College of Ed, had a lot of experience in grant writing. So she knew what areas to touch on. He said, if you want this proposal to review well, this is what you should say, this is what you should say. So we wrote the grant together and we sent it in. And normally for NSF, the way the grant writing works is you submit your grant application. It waits for about maybe 5 to 6 months. And then there's a panel of experts in your area that are called to review it. So they review it, they give different opinions, and then they recommend to the program officer if it should be funded or not. So we had applied for actually, our initial application was for 2.5 million. So the program officer writes back because there were different tracks. There was a track for $1 million was the beginning track. There was a track for over 2 million. So he writes back to us and he says, well, the reviews came back very well, but we think this should go to the lower track, $1 million. So if it was you, what would you say? You would accept it, right? You'd say, let's go with $1 million. That's what I was going to do. And that's what my colleague Ahmad was going to do. He said, let's just say yes and get the $1 million. But our colleague who is more senior said, no, we have to talk to the officer. We have to convince him that what we are proposing to do is more than $1 million. So we said, okay, let's convince him. So we wrote back and forth. And so he revised the budget and we got, I think, $1.8 million. And then later on, we got a supplemental for about $200,000. So that was my first big grant. And then later, a few years again, I got another grant, but as a co-PI for close to 1 million. Most of my grants, sorry, I'm working from home and my son is asking me a question. Yeah, sorry about that. The other grant I got was close to $1 million as a co-PI. Most of my grants are in education. In other words, I take the research that I do and I tailor make it and apply it in a high school setting. For example, if you're talking about cybersecurity or autonomous vehicles, how can you make some modules and implement these modules in a high school setting with teachers so that through project-based learning, they can learn and internalize these things that it can help them in their retention in math skills and so on. So then I applied for tenure. My tenure process was very, very easy because I had done a lot of work in publications, in grant writing. I advised a lot of master's students, PhD students. By the time I was putting in my application, I had a fair level of certainty that I would get the tenure. So I got the tenure, and maybe let me pivot a little bit and talk about how the tenure process works. The way the tenure process works is you put in your application, and it depends on each university, but usually there's a committee at the department, about 3 to 5. These are your peers that you work with. So they review your entire portfolio. your teaching, your research, your publications, your advising, and your service. And they vote. They vote yes or no. So in my case, 3 of them voted yes. And then now it goes to the department chair. Department chair reviews everything and he recommends or not. So he recommended my case. Then it goes to the college committee. Now the college committee represents it is composed of one faculty from each of the departments in the college. So I passed there. Then it goes to the dean of the college, he reviews. Then it goes to the university committee. Now the university committee is composed of at least one member from each of the colleges. And then I passed. Then it goes to the provost and then the president. So I passed. So I was promoted from an assistant professor to an associate professor with tenure. In most cases, once people get tenure, people get relaxed. They don't publish a lot. But in my case, I kept publishing. I kept advising students. I kept writing grants. I kept talking to students. I kept teaching. And that's what I still do up to now. So I was at the University of Toledo for close to 10 years. And then also later on, I applied to be promoted to the role of full professor. So from assistant professor, associate professor to full professor. The highest rank is a distinguished university professor. This is the highest rank where you have to have published a lot nationally and internationally. I haven't reached there yet. I hope someday I will. So as I was at the University of Toledo, other than teaching, other than research, I also volunteered a lot. I volunteered in department committees, in college committees. I also volunteered even up to now at NSF, National Science Foundation. This is where if people submit proposals, they call some experts to sit in a room or virtually to review. I've been a reviewer for NSF for maybe more than 6 or 7 years now. So I like to volunteer for service to contribute to humanity. But as I was at the University of Toledo, I had a long commute because my family lives primarily in Michigan. Now, Michigan and Ohio are neighboring states, so my commute was about an hour. And then I saw an opportunity at Eastern Michigan University, where I am now, which is much closer home, and I applied and I got the position. Now, before I came to Eastern Michigan, I had also risen through the ranks by God's grace to become an associate chair and then an interim chair of the department. When I came to Eastern Michigan University, I became the director of the school, which is almost like the chair of the department. So I've been there for almost a year now. And there I do a lot of administrative work, which is you talk to professors, you talk to students, you talk to staff, and help them succeed, but primarily to make sure that the program is robust, is strong, and the enrollment is strong. So on a day-to-day basis, I do administration now. I still advise students, but I do administration. Maybe now I can pivot a little bit and talk about administration in higher education. So leadership is a lonely place. The reason for that is because you make decisions, and sometimes those decisions are not always popular. Not everybody agrees with your decisions. But what you try to do is to make decisions that are fair and that are just. Okay. You make decisions that are in the long-term interest of the health of the students academically, for the growth of the students, but also to protect the institution against any lawsuit. So what I do day to day, when I go to work, I try as much as I can to walk to the door of my colleagues, say, hey, how are you doing? Just to get to know them. Because sometimes people can have some stuff going on, but you don't know. So you should be able to conceptually know who your faculty are, who your staff are, what your students are going through. And that allows you to make very informed judgments, very informed decisions. So in my school right now, I'm working hard to continue improving the enrollment, to continue improving the quality of our programs, to also improve the retention. Because even if you bring in more students, but the ones that you have, you don't retain them, you're not doing a very good job. And the way to look at retention is to talk to students and find out what they need in their classes, what needs to be improved, and then work with my faculty to make sure that we improve upon the quality of our programs. And I have very great faculty, very great school that I work with, a very supportive dean who I work with. So on a day-to-day basis, I work to improve the quality of our programs. I'm also working collaboratively with other colleagues from outside my institution to apply for some grants at NSF. So I know I've talked quite a bit, and maybe some of you might have questions, but let me begin concluding by talking a little bit about the students that I've advised either as a committee member or as a chair of a committee or as a co-chair. I have to look at my notes here, but I think I have advised close to, if I include the masters and I include the PhD students where I've been a committee member, I've been a primary advisor or a co-advisor. I think so far I have advised maybe close to 15, maybe 20 on that range. Some have graduated, some have not. But I want to talk primarily about two students that I've worked with, and I'll keep their identity confidential. One student was hard of hearing. He was hard of hearing. This was at the University of Toledo, in both of these cases. He was hard of hearing. He had been in our undergrad program, and he had been admitted to the master's program. And so he knew me. I used to talk to him, and I saw him in the hallway, and he looked a bit confused. And I talked to him and say, "What's going on?" And he told me that he was admitted to the master's program, but he was looking for an advisor. He wasn't even sure he wants to do a thesis. So I asked him to come and talk to me in my office. So we had a long conversation, and eventually I convinced him that the thesis option was a great idea because either you could do a thesis or you could do a project. So we went back and forth about the topic that he wants to pursue, and eventually we arrived at a topic. But the reason why I bring his story is because he graduated last semester. He had a little bit of a confusion of if he wanted to do the thesis option. He had some concerns because he was hard of hearing. But I worked very hard with him, and he worked extremely hard, and he graduated. So if I look back at my career, the last few years, I'm really very grateful for having worked with him. The other student that I want to highlight also was at the University of Toledo. She was doing her bachelor's in IT, information technology. She took one or two of my classes. Very, very great student, very brilliant, very hardworking, and very much involved in student activities. So she came to my office one day and she told me that she wants to pursue a PhD in computer science, but she was a bit doubtful. She was doubtful because she was thinking that because her background was in IT, not computer science, she probably could not be admitted to a PhD program. I saw the potential in her, but I talked to her and we worked together. And I told her that I see her potentially as somebody who could pursue a PhD in computer science. And so what we did was she took some classes that would prepare her for admission. Beyond IT, she took some calculus classes. And she began applying, and I wrote for her very strong letters of recommendation. She got admitted to University of California, Davis for a PhD in computer science, and she graduated last year. She graduated last year, yeah. So I'm very, very thankful to have worked with so wonderful students. And I'm using those stories just to say that in everything we do in life, whether it's teaching, whether it's research, whether it's leadership, our goal, at least my goal, is to make sure that I make a small impact in my own small way on the lives of students, on the lives of faculty. At the end of the day, you can publish all these papers, you can get all these awards, you can get all these grants, you can be called a great teacher. But ultimately, I think the true measure of our contribution is the positive impact we've made in the lives of other students or of other colleagues. I think that's the biggest impact. Lastly, let me say this in terms of leadership and administration. In my department where I work, I have a very diverse faculty. I have faculty from the US, I have faculty from different parts of the world, from the Middle East, from China, from Asia. And what I try to do as much as I can is to make sure that I appreciate the cultural differences that they have, and that while I appreciate these cultural differences, I bring them together. I embrace their cultural diversity, but also use those diversity as a strength for the department to bring them together. So I learn how to speak, how to say hi in Chinese. I know how to say hi in Chinese. I know how to say how are you in Arabic. I know how to say hi in India. So I learn these different cultural beliefs and backgrounds and languages, at least in a small way, because it allows me to connect more deeply with my colleagues. But above all, I try to be fair and just. And whenever I make decisions, especially if they're decisions that involve money, which is a very touchy subject, I want all my faculty to know that I've done them very fairly and very objectively. Because if your colleagues know that you are fair, you earn their trust. If they don't think you are fair, you lose their trust. And that's not a place where you want to be. So let me pause here for a moment and take some questions from from the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I lived in Beijing for some time. I don't know, I speak some Chinese. 谢谢你. Thank
Yeah.
you so much
Oh, you say
for,
Zhao Shanghao. How are you doing, right?
yeah, yeah. 早上好，
Zhao Shang. Yeah,
早上好.
you speak it very well with
Yeah,
the
because
Chinese.
I lived in Beijing, and interesting. I'm originally from Kenya, born in Nairobi.
Yeah, because from your name, yeah, yeah, your name says the last name looks very Kenyan. So you lived in Nairobi. Which part of Nairobi?
Komarok. That's
Oh,
I was, yeah.
oh, Komarok. Okay, I know where Komarok
Yeah,
is. Yeah,
I
yeah,
lived I lived there, but
yeah.
that was where I was born.
Good.
But thank you very much. I like the way you've touched on so many issues that are pertinent to like what graduate students are thinking about. Because in the past couple of months, like people have been coming and asking our guests like questions that you've answered. And sometimes our guests like tell their stories, but I feel like beyond just telling your story, you've answered questions that we've heard here about tenure, questions about teaching, questions about about grants. And I would just like to open it up to the people if they have any questions that they would like to ask our guest. Sharon, Philemon, Chen, Kubra. Like if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away.
Yeah, you can type it in the chat if you can't ask.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, you can type it and then I can ask it for you. I can ask the question out for you. Yeah,
yes,
please
Kubra.
ask.
Yeah,
Okay. I have a question.
yes.
Now I'm living in Turkey, and I finished my PhD last January. And now, in last April, it was my first NARST, and my real attention to being in be it there was I was looking for a postdoc position.
Okay.
Is there any easy way? I don't
Yeah,
know, maybe to find a postdoc position. I don't know.
yeah,
I am not sure about um, I just think that I learn what I can learn in my country. So I want to develop myself. I want to develop my teaching, my learning. I am thinking that can be a good chance to do this. So if you can give me a little tips for
yeah,
this, I will be very
yeah.
happy.
Thank you, thank you. So, Taki, are you in Istanbul? Are you in Ankara? Are you in?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, good,
that's so
good.
nice. I am in the north and the east part of the Turkey,
Okay.
but My PhD university is in Ankara, Hacettepe University.
Okay, good. And your PhD was in computer science? What was your PhD in?
Science education.
Oh, science education, science ed. Okay, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good question about a postdoc. So postdocs usually they are, I don't know if you're familiar with higher ed. Let me just send this first before I forget. Higher ed jobs, I think.com. Higher ed jobs, I think that's it. So there's a website called Higher Ed. So these are jobs for higher education. I think that's the right spelling, but let me just double check here if I give you the right website. Yeah, higheredjobs.com. So this higheredjobs.com, they normally post jobs about postdoc, about tenure track positions. And so have you published? Do you have any publications?
Yes, I have got some publication for publication.
Publications, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But one of them is about out of school learning,
Hmm.
and the other one is more about the science educational program in Turkey,
Good.
and the other one is about how the TPEC, the technology integration in the educational students,
Okay.
and my PhD is about gamification. I made a meta-analysis about it.
Okay.
So I am very interested in how we, as a teacher, how we make good interaction with game and technology in together when we are setting up a science learning settings. So uh, because in my country I saw that technology is coming very, very fastly, but teacher or students can catch that fast, but the teacher couldn't. So there is a big gap in here. So we have to. I think gamification is a good way to cover it. So I want to learn more about it.
Yes, good. It looks like you have a very interesting research topic. So what I would advise you to do is first go to higheredjobs.com and look for postdoc opportunities. That's number one, and list them down. The other thing is have a statement of research. Have a document that spells out your statement of research. In that statement of research, you can highlight at a very high level the research you've done in the past and what you are doing now and what you plan to do in the future. And then look for those postdoc opportunities. And then you can write a letter of intent to them, apply, but have very strong references, people who can give you a very strong recommendation. But apply it to as many positions as possible. And hopefully you can get an interview. I know that with the current environment of immigration, it could be a challenge coming from Turkey, but you never know. You never know. I've seen many people who've been hired from outside. So you give it a shot and don't give up. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will try. I will do my best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, speak with us today. My name is Sharon Unvisi. I'm a doctoral candidate from Florida State University in Science Education. So I had a question about the application process, right? So say for grad student like us who are still maybe 1 or 2 years away from graduating, when would you recommend starting the job search and application process? And yeah, I think I had a question about what you recommend us doing now to actually position ourselves as like strong candidates in the job market. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start by answering the second question. What you
Oh,
can do
okay.
now to make you stronger in the job market? Well, what you can do now is get very good grades, work hard in
Hmm.
school. Number two, if you're applying for a tenure track position, publish a lot. Publish, publish, publish. Even if you're not the primary author, you can collaborate with your other colleagues and publish. Number three, if you're applying for a job in the industry, try to look for summer internships because they'll give you some leverage as you apply. Now, when is the best time to apply? If you're looking for a tenure track position, I think the best time to apply is a year before you graduate, because the application process takes almost a year. So when you apply in your CV, you could say the date of anticipated graduation is maybe May of 2027, but apply at least a year before you graduate for the tenure track positions. For the industry positions, I'm not very familiar with them, but I think you should try to apply at least a semester before you graduate.
Thank you so much. Thank you for answering the question.
Thank you.
Chen Yu or Philemon, do you have any questions that you'd like to direct to our guest? And remember, you can type your question in the chat and we will read that out. And remember, sometimes,
Okay.
yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead. I'll
Yeah,
just.
I was saying that sometimes when you ask questions, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
not asking just for yourself, but you're asking for people who will watch this recording, for graduate students who will watch this recording, because probably
Yeah.
they're not here, but you're asking on their behalf. That might be a question that I've asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon.
I also I wanted to ask Dr. Olach about postdoctoral position. Like, in your opinion, is a postdoc something that most grad students, PhD grad students should actually be applying for? Like, is this something necessary in certain situations? Should you be looking out for, let's say before you graduate, should you be looking forward to a postdoc, or applying for a tenured position and all of that? Is there like a is there like a defined pathway, if that makes sense?
I don't think there's a defined pathway. I think it depends on a number of factors. One, it depends on your discipline. So if you're in computer science mostly, you could apply directly to a tenure track position without a postdoc, because computer science jobs, at least before AI, there are so many computer science jobs. So somebody who has a PhD in computer science could apply directly for a tenure track position or a position in industry. But if you're in a field like chemistry, I know a few people in chemistry, to get a tenure track position directly from college, from university, from a PhD in chemistry is quite challenging. So you want to get a postdoc, and the purpose of the postdoc is to allow you to publish a lot more to improve your CV and your profile. So the short answer is, it depends on what you're looking for. It depends on your field, but even more importantly, it depends on what you published, how much you published during your PhD work. If you published extensively during your PhD work, you might not need a postdoc after all. But if you still need to improve your publication, to improve your research profile, maybe a postdoc is helpful. So just a matter of weighing what you have, which means that during your PhD work, publish, 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 publish.
Thank you so much for answering my question. I really appreciate your insight.
Thank you. And I see a question from Chen Yu, and he's asking, how can you balance your job and publishing? Because publishing have to pay more and more time. So he's asking me, with my full-time responsibility, how do I balance publishing? It's a delicate balancing act, because I have to work, but I have to publish, but I have graduate students. So the beauty of having graduate students is, if you have a research idea and you give them the direction, then you can work with them to publish more, to do review of literature. But it's a matter of, how do you balance your time? You have to work hard, balance your time, and also not make sure that your family also, you take care of your family as well.
And then I'm just curious, because you have different responsibilities, and as a leader, an administrator, as a teacher, and as a publisher, researcher, and you're continuing to publish. Like, you've heard of like the Pareto principle, 20-80-20. And so I'm wondering, do you take such an approach like in your work so that you're effective? Is there an area as as a researcher, as an academic, is there an area that you focus your 20% of the energy so that you can get the 80%?
That's a very good question. In my earlier years as a tenure track candidate, I spent a lot of time in research because I wanted to boost my research publication, my potential, and the depth and breadth of my research. So a lot of my time I spent on research and a little bit of teaching and less on service. Once I built my research portfolio, I did a lot more service. But now in my admin role, I do most of my work doing administration because that's what I'm paid for. And then I spent a little bit of time on research and working with graduate students. So it's a delicate balancing act. But in the summertime, when school is out, that's when I spend a lot of my time on writing grants. Like right now, I'm working on 2 grants. When the semester begins, it gets a little bit busier. So less writing grant and more administration. So it's just a matter of being flexible and managing your time well.
Philemon, do you have a question that you'd like to ask our guest? Because we have a few minutes before we call it a day. So if you have a question that you'd like to. All right, we have 6 minutes to the top of the hour, the next hour, because I said we have people usually joining us from all over the world when they have opportunities. We have people joining us from India, China. Thank you, Cooper, for joining us all the way from Turkey. We really appreciate having all of you here. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Dr. Jared Lodge, for being generous to give your advice to support graduate students. And those of us who are still like coming up and trying to understand which way to go, we really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
And if there are no other questions, we can call it a day because it's a few minutes to the top of the hour. All
Thank you
right.
so much, Colin, and thank you everybody. All the best, and we'll connect.
Yes. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.